The Horizon's gift departed New York Harbor on the 7th of November, 1872, with a cargo of 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol and 10 souls aboard. Captain Nathaniel Cord stood at the helm with the satisfaction of a man embarking on a voyage that would be, by all reasonable expectations, uneventful. His wife Margaret stood beside him with their daughter Alice balanced on her hip, the child's face turned toward the retreating shoreline with the solemn attention 2-year-olds reserve for endings. The first mate, Thomas Drury, supervised the crew, 7 good men, experienced sailors all, as they made the ship ready for the Atlantic crossing to Genoa. It was the sort of November morning that made sailing seem like the most natural occupation in the world. The sky was clear. The wind was steady. Everything was as it should be. Margaret noticed the wrongness first, though she didn't call it that. Not yet. It was the 3rd day out, and she was in their cabin preparing Alice's midday meal when she realized the lamp oil smelled different. Not spoiled, not unpleasant, just different. Sweeter, perhaps, or thicker. The quality of the light it cast seemed changed as well, as if the flame were burning at a slightly different temperature than lamp flames ought to burn. She mentioned it to Nathaniel that evening as they sat at the small table in their quarters. He'd smiled at her with the gentle patience of a man who loves his wife and understands that women notice things men do not. The oil's from a new supplier, he'd said. Perhaps they've changed their refinement process. This was reasonable. Margaret accepted it because there was no reason not to accept it. The lamp continued to burn. The oil continued to fuel it. Everything continued as it should. But on the 4th day, Thomas Drury came to Nathaniel with a concern about the cargo. 9 of the barrels are weeping, sir, he said, standing in the doorway of the captain's cabin with his hat in his hands. Not badly, just a dampness around the seams. But it's peculiar, the wood around the leakage isn't stained. It's as if the alcohol is evaporating on contact with the air. Nathaniel went below to inspect the cargo himself. The hold smelled strongly of the industrial alcohol, that harsh chemical smell that caught in the throat. But beneath it, or perhaps woven through it, was something else. Something almost organic, like the smell of deep water, of things that lived in darkness and pressure. He examined the 9 barrels Drury had mentioned. They were indeed weeping at the seams, but only slightly. Nothing that would threaten the cargo's integrity. And Thomas was right. The wood showed no staining, no discoloration at all. The alcohol seemed to be disappearing into the air as if it had never been liquid at all. Keep watch on them, Nathaniel said. Note any changes in the log. This was reasonable. This was proper procedure. Everything was as it should be. But Margaret, standing at the threshold of the hold with Alice in her arms, felt something then, a coldness that had nothing to do with temperature, a sense of wrongness that she couldn't name but knew with absolute certainty. She looked at her daughter's face and saw that Alice was staring into the hold with that peculiar intensity children have when they see something adults cannot. Alice, Margaret whispered. The child's lips moved, shaping a word that Margaret couldn't quite hear over the creaking of the ship and the slosh of water against the hull. Swimming, the child might have said, or coming, or nothing at all, just the meaningless sounds of a 2-year-old's babbling. Margaret carried her daughter back up to the light and told herself that the unease she felt was simply the discomfort of being at sea. She'd sailed with Nathaniel before. She knew the ocean's moods. This was natural. This was normal. Everything was as it should be. On the 10th day out, the wind died. This was not unusual. Ships were often becalmed. But what struck Thomas Drury as peculiar was the quality of the stillness. The ocean had become perfectly flat, its surface like polished metal, reflecting the sky with such clarity that it was difficult to tell where water ended and air began. The crew went about their duties with the quiet efficiency of men who knew their work. But Nathaniel noticed they'd stopped talking. Not consciously, not deliberately. They simply didn't speak. They moved through their tasks in silence, and when they did need to communicate, they did so with gestures and nods. He mentioned this to Thomas, who looked at him with an expression Nathaniel couldn't quite read. Haven't you noticed, sir? Thomas said quietly. Our voices sound wrong. Nathaniel listened. Thomas was right. When he spoke, his voice had a quality to it he'd never heard before, as if his words were traveling through something denser than air, as if they were being heard underwater. "It's the stillness," Nathaniel said, though he didn't quite believe this himself. "Sound travels differently when there's no wind." This was reasonable. This was rational. But that night, Margaret woke to find Alice standing in her crib, staring at the porthole with that same intense focus she'd had in the cargo hold. "Alice," Margaret whispered, moving to her daughter's side. The child raised one small hand and pointed at the dark circle of glass. Margaret looked. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw something outside the porthole. Not in the water, in the air. A ripple, as if something vast had passed close to the ship, displacing the atmosphere the way a whale displaces water. Then it was gone, and there was only darkness and the perfect mirror stillness of the sea. Margaret told herself she'd imagined it, that she'd been half asleep, that the darkness and the strange quality of the becalmed ocean were playing tricks on her mind. She told herself this because the alternative, that something enormous and impossible had just brushed against their vessel, was not reasonable, was not rational, was not something she could allow herself to believe. Everything was as it should be. On the 15th day, they sighted land. The Azores, according to their position. They were making good time despite the periods of calm. Nathaniel noted this in the log with satisfaction. Another 5 days and they'd be in Genoa, the cargo delivered, the voyage complete. He was writing this entry when he heard Margaret scream. He ran from his cabin to find her standing on the deck. Alice clutched to her chest, staring at the ocean with a look of absolute terror. "Nathaniel," she said, and her voice was the voice of someone who has just understood something terrible. "Nathaniel, the water. Look at the water." He looked. The ocean around them was still perfectly flat, perfectly calm, but it was wrong. He could see it now, this wrongness he'd been trying not to acknowledge for days. The water wasn't behaving like water. It was too still, too perfect, and more than that, it was too deep. Not deep in the sense of measurement, deep in the sense of dimension, as if the ocean went down not just fathoms, but forever, as if they were floating not on water but on the surface of something vast and unknowable that had no bottom, no end, no comprehensible structure at all. Thomas appeared at his side, pale and shaking. "Sir," he said, "the barrels. The leaking has stopped." "That's good," Nathaniel said automatically, though he knew it wasn't good, knew that nothing about this was good. "No, sir, you don't understand. The barrels aren't leaking because they're empty. All 9 of them, completely empty, but we've had no spills. The alcohol is just gone." Margaret made a sound, half sob, half laugh. "It wasn't evaporating," she said. "It was being drunk. Something was drinking it." Nathaniel wanted to tell her this was impossible. Wanted to say that alcohol doesn't simply vanish, that things don't drink through solid wood, that whatever she was suggesting violated every law of nature and reason. But he couldn't, because he knew she was right. On the 16th day, the crew stopped moving. Not all at once. Gradually, one by one, the men would pause in their work and stand perfectly still, staring at the water with expressions of dawning understanding and profound terror. Nathaniel tried to rouse them, tried to give orders, to break whatever spell had fallen over his men. But they didn't respond. They simply stood and stared and slowly, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, began to tilt forward, as if the flat surface of the ocean was exerting a gravitational pull that had nothing to do with the earth. Willem went first. The young sailor stood at the rail for perhaps an hour, motionless, and then simply stepped over. There was no splash. The water accepted him with barely a ripple, and he was gone. Thomas tried to stop the others, tried to physically restrain them, but they moved with an inexorable purposefulness that could not be deterred. One by one, they went to the rail. One by one, they stepped over. By sunset on the 16th day, only Nathaniel, Margaret, Thomas, and Alice remained. They huddled in the captain's cabin, the door barred, as if wood and iron could protect them from what was outside. From what had been outside all along, they now understood. Waiting, patient, inevitable. "What is it?" Margaret whispered, rocking Alice, who had stopped making sounds entirely. Nathaniel didn't answer because he didn't have words for what he now understood. The ocean beneath them wasn't water. Or it was water, but water was something other than what humans had always believed it to be. Water was conscious. Water remembered. Water dreamed. And the thing that dreamed through water had become aware of them. It had tasted the alcohol leaking from the barrels, that industrial poison that mimicked the properties of water while remaining fundamentally other. And in tasting it, in drinking it, the vast consciousness that lived in the ocean's depths had become curious about the creatures who traveled its surface, who carried strange substances in wooden vessels, who existed in a realm of air and light that the deep-water dreamer could barely comprehend. It had reached up to investigate, just a tendril of awareness, just a ripple of attention from something so large, so ancient, that human minds could only perceive the smallest fraction of its totality. And that fractional touch was enough to break them. Nathaniel looked at his wife and daughter and first mate and knew with absolute certainty that they could not remain on this vessel. Whatever the thing beneath them was, it was learning, growing curious. Soon its attention would focus more fully, and when it did, "The lifeboat," he said. "We have to take the lifeboat." Thomas looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "To go where, sir?" "We're in the middle of the Atlantic. We have no provisions, no navigation equipment that's working properly." "It doesn't matter," Nathaniel said, and heard the edge of hysteria in his voice. "We can't stay here. Don't you feel it? It's coming up." And they could feel it, all of them, a pressure building in the air, in the water, in the very fabric of reality. Something enormous rising from depths that had no name, drawn by curiosity, by hunger, by an alien interest that was more terrifying than any malice could be. They gathered what they could carry and went to the deck where the lifeboat hung ready. The water below was no longer still. It was moving now, churning with a purposeful motion that suggested awareness, suggested attention, suggested anticipation. As Thomas lowered the boat, Nathaniel looked up at the sails of the Horizon's Gift, snapping gently in a wind that shouldn't exist on this perfectly calm night. The ship was beautiful in the moonlight, solid, real, safe, and utterly damned. They climbed down into the lifeboat, Margaret first clutching Alice, then Thomas, then Nathaniel. He cut the rope with shaking hands. The lifeboat drifted away from the Horizon's Gift, that good ship, that doomed vessel, carrying its cargo of 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol across an ocean that was not what any chart had ever depicted. They rowed. Thomas and Nathaniel pulled at the oars with desperate strength. Margaret sat in the stern, holding Alice, singing softly to keep the child calm, though her voice shook and broke on every word. Behind them, they heard a sound like water pouring into a vast hollow space, like something drinking, like an inhale that went on and on and on. When Nathaniel finally looked back, the ship was still there, still floating, still intact, but changed. Even at this distance, even in the darkness, he could see that the vessel looked wrong. It sat too low in the water, or too high. The angles of its masts seemed off. The shadows it cast in the moonlight fell in directions that violated the laws of geometry and light. "Don't look," he told Margaret. "Don't let Alice look." But he knew it didn't matter. The thing beneath them had already seen them, had already tasted them, had already begun the slow process of translation. They rode through the night. The water around them began to smooth, becoming that perfect mirror surface again. And in that surface, Nathaniel could see reflections that weren't reflections, could see depths that weren't depths, could see the vast shape of something rising to meet them from everywhere at once. His arms stopped rowing. Thomas's oars went still. Margaret looked up from Alice and met her husband's eyes. And in that moment, they understood together that this was not an ending but a transformation. A drowning that was also a baptism into a reality that human language had no words to describe. The water rose around them like an embrace. And Nathaniel Cord opened his mouth to scream or pray or beg, and found that he couldn't remember how to do any of those things. found that memory itself was becoming fluid, dissolving like salt in infinite water, dispersing into something vast and patient and utterly alien that had all the time in the world to understand what they had been. Had been. The words echoed in what remained of his consciousness as the water closed over his head. Had been. The Horizon's gift was found by the British brig Fortunata on the 5th of December, 1872. She was discovered adrift approximately 400 miles east of the Azores, under partial sail, in good condition. The boarding party found the ship deserted. The cargo of industrial alcohol was intact, save for 9 empty barrels. The captain's log had been maintained up until the 25th of November. The last entry noted their position and the sighting of Santa Maria in the Azores. There was no indication of disaster, no signs of struggle. The ship's lifeboat was missing. The Fortunata searched the surrounding waters for survivors. They found nothing, no trace, just the empty sea, flat and calm, reflecting the sky with perfect clarity. An inquiry in Gibraltar found no evidence of foul play. The case was closed with the notation that the crew had likely panicked and perished in the lifeboat. This was reasonable. This was rational. The ship was eventually purchased and refitted. She sailed for 13 more years before being wrecked off Haiti in an insurance fraud scheme. But sailors who knew her story refused to crew aboard her. They said that on perfectly calm nights, when the ocean went flat as glass, you could hear sounds coming from her hold. Sounds like drinking. The ocean is deeper than any chart shows. The ocean remembers. And somewhere in depths that have no bottom, 10 souls still exist. Translated, transformed, eternally drowning in a consciousness that drinks them sip by sip. In the still water, in the perfect calm, in the patient appetite of something vast beyond all comprehension.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.